There's an interesting connection between Aaron's lifespan and Hallel, which will teach us what the overarching theme of Hallel is. Beshayches mit dem Soul von Shneis Chai Aaron HaKohen, was wird erzählt in the Pasuk B'Finas B'Parashat Seinu, in our Parashat Massei. It describes Aaron's lifespan specifically, so with regards to his life, 123 years, that Aaron HaKohen was 123 when he passed away in Hor HaHor. State in Yerushalmi, the Yerushalmi says an interesting observation. There's a particular way in which you're supposed to respond Hallelujah during the course of Hallel, at least according to one view. The Yerushalmi says an emergence that you do it 123 times to correspond to Aaron's lifespan. Question is, what's the connection between Aaron's lifespan and saying Hallelujah in Hallel? Is Yerushalmi Mevor? So the Risham explains, Halukah b'kotshoi. The pasuk says you should praise the Eibishter b'kotshoi in his holy state. LeAaron b'kadoshoi. It's referring to Aaron, who is the holy representative of the Eibishter. Aaron kadosh Hashem. Aaron, who is the holy one in Hashem's eyes. Thus haste, as the Hillel from the Eibishter is verbunden mit Aaron HaKodesh Hashem, via state Halukah b'kotshoi. In other words, the Yerushalmi is saying that Halukah, praising the Eibishter, is associated with Aaron, who is the holy one. So now the fact that Yerushalmi is connecting not only Hallel, where you say Hallelujah 123 times, to the lifespan of Aaron, but also mitim pasuk Hallel kebel kotche, but specifically to that pasuk, as the Hillel dav zam bekotche, in other words, that the praising of the Eibishter has to be done in a context of holiness, is move on. From that we understand, as the Shaychus von Aaron Samiras Hallel is nicht bloß ein Inyan from Mispar. That's telling us that this is not just some kind of a kind of generic link between there's 123 times you say the word and here's 123 years, so the number links. Was beide is misparim kufchav gimel. Was is bloß ein chitzoni, because let's be honest, numbers are actually quite superficial to a message. Rather, the Yerushalmi wants us to understand that there is a thematic link between what Hallel is all about and what Aaron's life is all about. Amiras Hallel darf sein verbunden mit Kotshoi. It's illustrating that saying Hallel has to be associated with holiness or the Eibishter's holiness. Which is what Aaron represents. In fact, that's actually why it lands up being the same number, not the other way around. The number is a clue to the theme. The theme is actually what's most important, that there's holiness represented by Aaron, which has to come out in Hallel. In which case we have to ask, what is the link between saying Hallelujah in Hallel and Aaron and his life and what he represents? So, as the Kufchav Gimel Piyomim Halukah Zayin Keneged Shnosav Shel Aaron, this concept that 123 Halukahs equates with 123 years of Aaron's life, Ve'kebrach Sefer Rambam is something the Rambam also quotes. The halachas from Amiras Hallel when he goes to the halachas of saying Hallel. Was hat eingestellt in Hilchas Chanukah, which parenthetically, actually the Rambam included in the laws of Chanukah. So the Rambam describes how Hallel was said in the times of the early sages. Let's look at the exact language that the Rambam says. What happens? The person who's leading the Hallel says the bracha. Then he says Hallelujah. And everybody else responds Hallelujah. Then he says the next phrase. They respond to that Hallelujah. Then he says the next phrase, they say Hallelujah. He gives various examples of how it goes. And then he summarizes, that's how it goes. You keep repeating right throughout the Hallel. After each phrase, everybody says Hallelujah. Until in the end, if you follow this method, you've said Hallelujah 123 times by the end of Hallel. Says the Rambam, Simen Lohem Shenoisav Shel Aaron. A good way to remember how many times is to remember how old Aaron was. So let's understand this. Since Yodua, as a Sefer Halachas Rambam is a Sefer from Halachas. We know very well that the Rambam's Mishnah Torah is a book of Halacha. In other words, the Rambam is only going to really deal with issues which are relevant to Halacha. The Rambam avoids things which belong in a medrash or just there to tell us facts. That's not the Rambam's goal over here. So the Yavet says anything which is not an outright din or a specific instruction to us, that's not something the Rambam is going to deal with in this compilation. Is a shema bringt out them siman. So why does the Rambam have to tell us 123 halelukos connected shneis of shalar siman lehem shneis of shalar? Why is that relevant? Just tell us halacha. How many times you say halelukah? Okay, so bepashtus is the time for nasiman to help from gedenken. So normally when we give a symbol for something, it's to help us remember. Maybe that's what the Rambam's doing, is giving us a memory aid. Gedenken and maybe that's what the Rambam wants. He wants us to remember how many times you should say Hallelujah, because it's not one of the classical numbers that we typically have in Judaism, so you need some anchor to remember it. But the truth is, that is a bit of a stretch, that the only reason the Rambam would quote this number is to help us remember how many times to say Hallelujah. We don't find the Rambam doing this elsewhere in the Mishnah Torah, to quote numbers in order to help us to remember things. So why here? Therefore, it's more logical to suggest that the symbol of the 123 years of Aharon is relevant to the halacha of saying Hallelujah 123 times, and therefore it's relevant to what Hallel is all about, as we shall see. The explanation is this. Mit dem bringen dem Simen is the Rambam meistens zu andeuten dem Gede von Aniyas Hallelujah. By telling us that the 123 times you say Hallelujah is linked to Aharon HaKohen, and his lifespan, is because the Rambam wants to explain what this whole business is of answering Hallelujah. As die Alekuf Chov Gimel Piyomim, was man darf eine seine Hallelujah stellen zusammen ein Inyan. That's what the Rambam wants us to know. It's not 123 disparate Hallelujahs. It's 123 Hallelujahs which come together in order to form a singular message and theme. Und demselben Menschen. Exactly as 123 years is the life of one person. So therefore the Rambam is alluding to the fact that if you skip one of the Hallelujahs, then the entire principle of what Hallel is about will be lacking. What we need is the full complement of 123 responses. Because those 123 responses altogether, that will achieve what the theme of Hallel is all about, just like Aaron's 123 years put together the theme of his life. So, was is der Hasbara von dem, as die Kufchav Gimel Piyomim, Aniyas Hallelujah, sind alle zusammen ein Inyan. So, what is it? What is it about these 123 times? What is the theme? Why is it relevant to Hallel? Plus, the fact that the particular symbol we're using as a memory aid is Aaron's lifespan, is therefore moving as das verbunden mit Inyan shel Aaron. So this is obviously somehow connected to who Aaron is and what he's all about. And the question is, was ist die Sheiches? What is Aaron's life? What is the persona of Aaron? What is the message of Aaron to do with the Hallel? So to understand that, let's understand how the Rambam looks generally at the way in which we should say Hallel. Which he writes. The Rambam quotes, as we've seen, that early minhag where everybody repeated Hallelujah 123 times. He says, not only does he quote that this is the original historical way that we used to do Hallel, but he says it's actually the correct minhag to follow. It's the Chernet move, and that's strange. It says, as the time from the minhag Hallel, is given, something strange. The Gemara tells us the reason everybody just said Hallelujah was because they didn't know the words. They didn't know the rest of Hallel. There were many people in the community who were not proficient to be able to daven on their own, and they were relying on the Shliach Tzibur to daven on their behalf and to be moitzi them, and their participation is they're saying Hallelujah. How can the Rambam say this is the ideal custom? Surely the Rambam should have said the ideal is that everybody learns how to say Hallel and they all say Hallel on their own. As der von Gufa gedrungen, as das Rambam is AVP, was die Sibes Atakona in Seder Amiras Hallel is given to the Einer became. That implies that the Rambam's attitude and perspective is, yes, this was initiated because of a lack in the community at the time. Nevertheless, Hota Amira, in Azaifen, nevertheless, this way of reading Hallel, asal durch dem Gonet Fellen bei Hamira Eich von die Bekim, is important to make sure that Hallel is done properly, even for those people who know their way around the Hallel. Says wie man wollt allein gesagt ganz Hallel. Why? Because if you answer Hallelujah 123 times, then it is considered as if you have said the whole Hallel. Why would that be? Shlomo as the time the roof is moving with Divrei Rambam in some Psak Halacha instead of Amiras Hallel. So to understand why that would be the case, that by saying this Hallelujah 123 times, it's now considered even for the person who doesn't know their way around the Hallel, as if they said the complete Hallel, that is alluded to in what the Rambam tells us. As two things that the Rambam says. Number one, as the Aniyas Ha'om is Hallelujah. Firstly, the Rambam is of the view that the communal response is the word Hallelujah. Nicht wie die Dev von anderen Rishonim, als Aniyas Hallelujah ist gewähnt nur beim ersten Perek von Hallel, aber bei den anderen Prokim vielleicht mit einem dem Wort, welches Rosh Hashanah Perek. The Rambam here disagrees with many of the other commentators who actually were of the view that the Chazan says a phrase and then everybody is supposed to repeat either that phrase or a word from that phrase. The Rambam is specifically saying it's Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah again and again. That's relevant to our conversation. The second thing that's relevant, Beis, the fact that the Rambam is fixated on the fact that there's a specific amount of Hallelujahs that you have to say, Siman Lahem Shnois of Shel Aharon, which are represented by Aaron's lifespan, which means that the Rambam is saying you have to have all 123 repeats of the word Hallelujah in order to be considered, like you said, the whole Hallel. Why? They're bearing them. So let's explain. So this whole process of having a person who is qualified, leading the Hallel and effectively saying it on behalf of the community, so the Meiri has a question about it. Why do you have to answer at all? Why does the community have to respond? We know that we have a principle in Judaism. If you listen to somebody saying a bracha on your behalf, it's considered as if you've said it. Like you listen to the Megillah on Purim. You don't necessarily have to read the Megillah yourself. So why over here do we have to say Hallelujah? Don't say anything. Listen carefully to the Chazan. Have in mind that he should be moed to you, and that's it. So therefore, the Meiri answers, as Hallel kein tfilahu. Hallel is a form of davening. When it comes to davening, we have a principle which is you can't daven on somebody else's behalf. But the Meiri says, seeing as Hallel is only like davening, but it's not actually classical davening, therefore we were lenient and we allowed people the opportunity to participate in Hallel just by saying one key word repeatedly through the course of the Hallel. Von dem aber, was der Rambam sagt wegen der Meaning, although the Rambam seems to be saying something different, because the Rambam says this is the ideal way to do Hallel. The Meiri is saying it's okay, it's because we don't have a choice. We'll allow people to participate in the most lenient way possible. The Rambam is saying this is the ideal. Ist manchmal ist das nicht akula, vor dem Demut ist moving, als es meroi nicht zu nutzen akula, und sagen ganz Hallel. That implies that the Rambam obviously does not agree with the Meiri, that this is just a kula, it's a leniency in order to allow participation. Because if it were a leniency, the advice would be learn how to say the Hallel. Which is why we have to conclude, as the Das Rambam, tun auf die Aniyas Hallelujah, as soll verrechen werden Punkt, wenn man wollt allein gesagt ganz Hallel. The Rambam's view must be that if you say the 123 Hallelujahs, it is considered as if you absolutely did the full Hallel, even though you didn't. And that would be much more similar to saying Amen to a bracha, where it's considered as if you made the bracha. When we're listening, and we're listening with intention, and the intention is to yotze sein, we want to be included in the bracha that the person is making. But we don't say Amen. We had all the intention in the world. So, okay, you fulfilled your mitzvah, but you are not considered as if you made the bracha. But when you say Amen, you're now considered as if you read the bracha. Same thing here. When you say Hallelujah, it's like you said the Hallel. Not only did you fulfill your mitzvah of listening to Hallel, it's like you said the Hallel. Thus says in other words, if I'm going from the perspective of the Meiri, the Meiri is saying, answering Hallelujah does not make you fulfill the mitzvah of saying Hallel. It's just a way to assist the community. Like he says, it's basically to generate a tremendous amount of simcha. Das heißt, im Chiyuv von Amiras Hallel kann man yotze sein b'shmiya midin shemea ko'inei. In other words, the Meiri says, listen to Hallel, you fulfilled the mitzvah of Hallel, like somebody listening who is considered as if they said it. Look, there is also simcha, but if you want to have the simcha, which Hallel is all about, then you got to do more. You can't just listen. You have to say something. Says the Meiri, say the word Hallelujah, now you get the simcha, which is associated with Hallel, which is a big component of what Hallel is all about. The Rambam takes it further. The Rambam learned aber, as Anias Haluka Chule is nicht as Zaitik in Bechiv Amiras Hallel. The Rambam saying, you saying Hallelujah is not just a sidebar. Hallel is there. Hallel produces Simcha. Now you're saying the Hallelujah, you're getting the Simcha of Hallel. Naratel von Chiv Amiras Hallel. Rather, the Rambam says saying Hallelujah means you're fulfilling the requirement to say Hallel. If you want Simcha of Hallel, you got to say the whole Hallel. Und der Fall hat man mit Taking given Daniel's Chuluk, der jeder soll werden keimer Hallel. Therefore, says the Rambam, we gave a person an option. Say these Hallelujahs. Now it's considered as if you said the entire Hallel. Now you've got the Simcha at the highest possible rate. That's why the Rambam says we encourage this minig. If people don't know how to say the Hallel, they must say the Hallelujahs. They got to participate because we want everybody saying the entire Hallel, and this is considered like saying the whole Hallel. Now, bald as the Anias davon uftan, as man so sein Kemer Hallel is verstandig. So if you go with the Rambam's view, which is saying Hallelujah makes it as if you're saying Hallel, this verstandig we can understand. As what man tagen given a Nusach ausgeklimmen a Wort, was hat a Scheiches a Ganzkeit von Hallel. So out of all the things that we would have chosen, what did the Torah choose? What did the Rambam choose for us? Something which incorporates in it everything that Hallel is all about. It's not an arbitrary word because it's an easy word for people to know, so we'll turn that into the refrain. This is the word and encapsulates everything that Hallel is all about. Just like Amen. Amen means whatever you have just said is true, and therefore I'm completely behind you and I completely agree with you. That's why it's considered as if you've said the bracha. On the Rebbe halt the Rambam as man not eine given halukah al kol davar. That's why the Rambam says the word that's used in the refrain is the same word halukah again and again. On nit rashi prakim, not the key word of each particular paragraph. Warum das direkt heißt im Teichen kloli vikri von Hallel, because halukah is the word that captures what Hallel is all about, and we want to capture what Hallel is all about so that it's considered as if you've said the whole Hallel. Und Jois, as the Mechuven from them say is Kedei soll sein und wie mir sagt allein ganz Hallel, because the objective over here is that it should be considered like you've said the whole Hallel is moving. As the zuvorden sich Halakuf Chavachov Gimel Piyam and Manias Halukah. So which word should be repeated again and again and again? The word Halakuf was der Fall, bringt der Amman dem Simon Kanal Siv Beis. That's the word that encapsulates Hallel. That's the key to being considered as if you've said the Hallel. That's the one that has to be 123 times. That's what the Rambam is illustrating to us. What's that got to do with Aharon? Leitem wird man verstehen die Scheiches von Anias Halukah zu Shalom zu Aharon. Now we understand why saying Hallelujah is linked specifically to Aharon, und euch zu Schneis of Shal Aharon, and to Aaron's lifespan, which of course represents what his whole life is all about. What is Aaron's life all about? We well know. In Yonah Shal Aharon is Eyev Sholem, Veredev Sholem, Eyev Sabrias, and Mekarvan LaTorah, as we very well know. Aaron is a person who loves and pursues peace, loves people and brings them close to Torah. The Achdus von Alle Eden, in a phrase, Aaron's life is all about Jewish unity. Und the Shal Aharon wird ausgedrückt in Torah Bekesher Minyan Shneis Chayov, and Aaron's theme of his life is echoed in his lifespan. B'shas Moshe, when he's given Ben Kufchav Gimel Shana state in Pasuk, what happened when Aaron passes away at 123 years? It says, Vayifku Goyim Kol Beis Yisrael, the entire Jewish community mourned for him. And Chazal explain why that is, as in them is Aaron given Afilim Mervi Moshe, that in that respect Aaron was greater than Moshe. Vorim Minyana is given Reid of Shalom because he pursued peace, and therefore everybody loved him, and therefore everybody mourned him. And das is the Sheiches von Daniel Halukah zu Shneis of Shal Aharon. That's the connection between the passing of Aaron and Hallelujah. Because besides the practicality, that why do we say Hallelujah for people who don't know how to read? That's exactly Aaron's way of doing things. Let's deal with the people who are distant from Torah and bring them in. Let's find a way to include them, as we're doing over here by saying Hallelujah, which is going to include everybody. Besides that is euch, der Aufruf von der Takone is, as anstatt jede Eid zu sagen Hallel für sich, the way that this Takone was made, instead of having every person just saying Hallel on their own, the entire community is now brought together in unity, which is Aaron's whole theme, saying Hallel together. Und noch mehr, wie bald als tun auf, es sein jeder sagt ganz Hallel, not only is everybody participating together, but by saying these Hallelujahs, the Rambam tells us that it's as if they've said the entire Hallel, kum tois, as das ist an achtes amitis. So it's real unity. Everybody's really doing the same thing, which is exactly what Aharon is all about. Had we only fulfilled this by listening, and that's considered as if you had said the words, then not everybody's on the same page, not everybody's united, because yes, everybody's fulfilled the mitzvah together, but it's the sabin and neifim was the mitzvahs Hallel. It's nicht gleich bei allem, but not everybody's fulfilled the mitzvah in the same way. Because Einer der Schatz is Mekayim durch Hamira, the Chazan is fulfilling the mitzvah of Hallel by saying the words, and alle andere is einem Shemei Mekabel von dem Schatz, whereas everybody else are passive recipients listening to the Schatz, and their participation is passive. They're fulfilling their mitzvah through his words, so they're not all on the same page. Aber durch die Anias von Halukah wird aufgetan, als alle haben dem in Hallel auf demselben Neufen. But now, because everybody's responding Halukah, everybody is sharing the identical experience of Hallel. Because Amiras Hallel, when you say Halukah, it's like you've said the whole Hallel. Und das Kufa is in an Neufen Shalachtos, and we're doing it with absolute unity. The Ein Amira Shalashatz is the Amira from Kol Ha'am, but Zayin Einen. What the Shatz is saying is what they're saying. It's all considered absolute unity. And that will also help us to address a broad question which relates over here to the Rambam. Why did the Rambam specifically set the laws of Hallel in the halachas of Chanukah? The Cheri is Mekayim in Hilchas Tefillah. Surely Hallel belongs in the halachas of davening. Isn't Hallel part of davening? Now we understand why. Because the way that we've approached the understanding of how Hallel works in the Rambam's halacha, it turns out as eine von die iketik inyonim in amiras Hallel the minhag harishin aber was Israel leilech, because if you follow the original custom of Hallel, which the Rambam says is the ideal custom of Hallel, is dachtus von Eden, it's all about unity. Which means that everybody is completely united in all doing the same thing in unison. That message is the way the Rambam concludes Hilchas Chanukah as that the entire purpose of Torah is to bring peace, unity to the world. Now we know that the Gemara says after the story of Sancheriv that Eibishter wanted to make Chizkiah into Mashiach. But the criticism of Chizkiyahu was that he had these tremendous miracles happen to him, and he did not compose songs of gratitude to the Eibishter. The Rebbe said nicht gewend der was hat Geld gewend Eden, therefore he ended up losing the opportunity of being the one to take the Eden out of Golus. That's on the negative, and we all know that the positive is much more powerful. Is moving as in from Amiras Hallel v'Shira iflisim is makarev meivid the Geula. So therefore, if we do give songs of gratitude and we sing Hallel, that hastens the Geula. So therefore, the fact that we've clarified an halachic issue in the laws of saying Hallel, and that stimulates us to thank and praise the Eibishter for all of the great miracles that he's done for us. So it's things that we can see clearly. This is the Eibishter's hands. That's the Eibishter who's empowering us in order to be able to succeed. And we praise the Eibishter for that. We should, through that, have the merit of singing the ultimate song, the 10th song, which is reserved for the time of Mashiach and sing it in a way of a new song, a song that will never have any negative following it. That's why it's in the masculine. And that should happen with the coming of Mashiach immediately.